Hi, and welcome to Objective 5. And in Objective 5, what we're going to do is take a look and explore a little bit more deeply monopolies' impact on social welfare. Remember, social welfare is market efficiency to us as economists. So we're going to look at here how a monopolist, we learned in Objective 3, how we have deadweight loss. We also talked a little bit about that before. And in this objective, we're going to see how monopolists can capitalize on that idea of deadweight loss and actually charge people according to what they're willing to pay. And certainly consumers wouldn't be so stupid as to tell monopolists what they're willing to pay, and yet we do. So let me go ahead and share my slides and we'll get after it. Okay. So a couple things to remember before we jump into this lecture is remember that in a monopoly, the monopolist is going to produce at a quantity that maximizes profit. And that quantity that maximizes profit is where marginal revenue and marginal cost are the same. To find the price that they're going to produce, they're going to first find that quantity, and then they're going to follow that up, and their price will also be in conjunction where marginal revenue and marginal cost meet. So it'll be a little bit higher than what we saw. We also know that because of this fact, that monopolists will have a dead weight loss in the market. And that's why we say this is no longer efficient. Let's talk a little bit about how that monopolist might capitalize on that idea of dead weight loss. Excuse me. All right, so this is price discrimination. And when we talk about price discrimination, it's not necessarily where we're discriminating against a protected class, because that would be illegal. What we're discriminating is based upon a person's willingness to pay. So if we have one consumer who is willing to pay more, can we actually charge that consumer more? And you might think, well, that doesn't sound right, but we do it all the time. Okay. So again, we're using willingness to pay, not a protected class, and we're actually going to say a monopolist will increase the quantity if it can pay people, if it can charge people according to the willingness to pay. So here we have a graph, and again, remember that the monopolist will want to produce at the quantity that maximizes profit. That would be this quantity right here where marginal revenue and marginal cost meet. To price this product, they're following up to the demand curve to get a person's willingness to pay, and this will be the price in a monopoly. That sub M just means in a monopoly. Because of this fact, we know that if we look at this, and this would be a perfectly, yes, there we go, okay. All right. So here's our consumer surplus. Remember, consumer surplus is the price, or is the area above the price but below the demand curve. This is the monopolist profit, and then we have deadweight loss. So I'm going to give you just a second here to kind of look at each of those. Remember that because we have deadweight loss, those are consumers which are not in this market according to their willingness to pay. But because the monopolist charges a higher price, these individuals, again, if they're standing in line according to the demand curve, these individuals are not in the market. That's what makes one of the reasons why a monopolist is inefficient. Okay, let me erase that. And let's move on. Okay, if this is quantity equilibrium, because remember, for a monopolist, marginal cost is the supply curve. If this is quantity equilibrium, then when we look at this, this would be perfect price discrimination, meaning that we should be at quantity equilibrium, but the monopolist chooses to be here at quantity that, I'll use their same quantity that maximizes profit, follow it up, follow it over to price. This is the price for the monopolist. And again, here's our deadweight loss in this kind of area here. Here's our consumer surplus. Notice it's a lot lower, but the monopolist profit, is right here in this, let's do it this way. right here in this rectangle. Okay, now this is perfect price discrimination that we're going to talk about here in just a moment. And in perfect price discrimination, what's going to happen is the monopolist is actually going to expand their quantity. And as they're expanding their quantity, they're going to charge everyone. So let me just put this in here. So we have the quantity for the monopolist, the quantity equilibrium. So if I follow this up as close as possible, there we go. So what's going to happen is the monopolist is going to charge each individual here according to their willingness to pay. So they're intentionally going to increase output, but when they do, the price is going to be very variable, will be variable based upon a person's willingness to pay. So let's call this person 1 here, and their willingness to pay, let's put some numbers in here, makes a little more sense. Okay, so here's our price for the monopolist. Let's say our price for the monopolist, excuse me, my voice is going. My price for the monopolist is $100. Well, person 1, this individual right here, is willing to pay $99. So what would the monopolist would do would say, sure, I'll produce 1 more unit, but I'm going to charge you $99. Let's say this individual right here, their willingness to pay might be $80. They're not willing to pay the $99, but they are willing to pay $80. So the monopolist says, sure, I'll expand the quantity, but I'm going to charge you according to your willingness to pay. Now, certainly, consumers aren't stupid enough. Not that we're stupid, but consumers aren't willing to tell somebody how much they're willing to pay. So let me ask you, have you ever done eBay auctions? If you have, you probably put in a bid, and isn't that just your willingness to pay for that product? And as time runs out, maybe some other behavioral economic things take over, like your sense of competition and wanting to win. And so when we look at this, it's not uncommon that consumers will actually tell the producer what they're willing to pay. Let's get back at our slide here. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and erase the ink on this particular slide so that we can get a better perspective of what we're talking about as I move into this next point here. Okay, so basically, remember we had this dead weight loss if a monopolist is not using price discrimination. And again, it's not discrimination on a protected class. It's discrimination based upon our willingness to pay. So this, again, is the quantity that the monopolist wants to produce at. And this was dead weight loss, right? Now, I talked about this one, but what about up here? Wasn't that consumer surplus? And it was. But here's the thing. What if the monopolist can also charge these buyers up here according to their willingness to pay? So that means buyer 1 up here has the highest willingness to pay. So we're going to charge them, again, kind of using that $100 as an example, maybe they're willing to pay $300. So the monopolist is actually going to charge them a higher price. You're going to charge them $300 versus the $100 where they're actually making profit. This is interesting because when we think about it, we say, well, you know, charging people different prices for the same thing. We do it. Think about senior coffee. Think about student discounts. So all of these is where the monopolist charges people according to their willingness to pay. So here's some examples. Now notice perfect price discrimination, and this is where you capture all the dead weight loss and all the consumer surplus is usually not possible because not every firm knows this information. But with data and analytics, many times we can tell what a buyer's willingness to pay is. If you've ever filled out a warranty, or many times software will ask you questions about things. It asks you what products you've purchased, what's your income level, all of those kinds of things. We can aggregate that together mathematically to kind of get an idea of what is a buyer's willingness to pay. We certainly don't announce it to sellers, although I just used the example of eBay, okay? So here's some additional examples. Movie tickets, right? You know, my husband's the first one to say, I'm a senior and I get a senior discount. And my daughter's the first one to say, I'm a student and I get a student discount. And I'm the first one to say, I'll pay full price. Okay? Airline prices. This is totally, we see this all the time. You know, first class, some amenities versus business class versus coach. Also, you might change your behavior based upon price and willingness to travel. So maybe you stay one additional day at a resort or something to get that cheaper airfare. Because again, we make decisions as long as the benefit of that decision outweighs the cost of that decision. Opportunity cost included here. Other examples, again, discounts. You know, senior coffee. I used to work at McDonald's, very first job I had. And senior coffee, boy, if you didn't ring it up correctly, it was kind of an issue, okay? People would come in 8 to 9 and they would want their senior coffee, okay? Another one is Pell Grants and those kinds of things that we use, okay? So a lot of us, particularly, I mean, if you're a Costco member, you buy a lot of stuff, right? I keep using all these little jokes about toilet paper right now, but seriously, if you were a Costco member and you stocked up on that, you're probably really happy that you did. Okay, so notice that this sounds a little bit hinky to us when we talk about a perfectly competitive market versus a monopoly. Perfectly competitive market, the buyers have all the power and they are price takers. Here in a monopoly, the producer is a price maker. So looking at everything we've talked about in terms of the welfare economics or the efficiency of the market, this is why the US doesn't usually, we don't buy into the idea of monopolies. We like competition because it ultimately will drive the price down, except for those natural monopolies that we've already discussed in Objective 1. Okay, that's the end of our objective, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care.